So, good morning, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Very wonderful to have everybody here at the Hebrew University on this auspicious occasion. And it gives me very great pleasure and honor to introduce to you one of the leading teachers of Tibetan Buddhism today, Dzongtsar Jamyang Gyaltsen Rinpoche. And Rinpoche has been here at the university for a few days now. And he led a meditation workshop for our students and met the faculty. And it's actually seems like a very good moment for the future of Buddhist studies in Israel. We're extremely grateful, Rinpoche, that you've come here personally. Extremely grateful to the foundation, Kanjoli Che, the executive director of the foundation, who came with Rinpoche and has also been a very warm and positive presence. And I also want to say a special word of thanks to Jane, Rinpoche's student here in Israel, that's right. And really, Jane, thank you very much. Jane was the initiator of this communication, this connection, and it's thanks to her vision and her perception. And she really somehow knew it's some deep karmic thing, both in her and somehow with the university and the foundation. And I can't quite explain, but there really is a kind of sense that things are going so smoothly, and it's something you perceived, and really thank you very much for that. I also, if I began with the words of thanks, I want to thank, well, first of all, there's the group of volunteers from the university, some of our MA students and BA students. I mentioned the names at the workshop, so I won't go through that again, but just to say that there has been a really wonderful group of students that has really allowed this to happen, and we wouldn't have been here otherwise. And then also I need to thank, well, generally the university has been incredibly positive, and I actually want to say a word about that. And just to give an extra kind of sense of what's actually happening here about the connection between the foundation and the university. But I do also want to, on the simple level of thanks, thank my colleagues at the Department of Asian Studies and the Department of Religious Studies and the Dean and the President's Office and the Rector's Office. Everybody's been incredibly supportive, which is very, very good news. Most importantly, the Department of the Program for Indian and Indonesian Studies. So I end with the Program for Indian and Indonesian Studies to say that that is actually the home of Buddhist studies at the university. The Program of Indian and Indonesian Studies is part of the Asian Studies program, but very much connected to the Religious Studies, the Asian Studies Department and the Religious Studies Department. And I just want to say an extra word about the logic of this connection. So many of you have noticed that this is Rinpoche's first visit to Israel, and that he only came to the university. And I don't want to stress the point too much, but it is a point worth noticing. And it says something about Rinpoche's commitment and the foundation's commitment, and of course he's not the only one in Tibetan Buddhism to think that the universities are a very important context for the study of Buddhism, for the preservation of Buddhism. I would even say for the flourishing of the Dharma, although I shouldn't say that maybe as a university professor. But it's true, because there are no clear boundaries between what happens, there are no absolute boundaries between what happens in the context we call Dharma and the intellectual study we conduct at the university. And a good example of this is the meditation workshop that was the core of Rinpoche's visit. So we had a meditation workshop that was open to all students of the university and faculty. We have faculty and administrative faculty too, and students from wherever, but mainly students from the Asian and Religious Studies departments. And the idea is that, we study about all these things. People come do introduction to Buddhism and introduction to India or China or whatever, to Christianity maybe if they're in religious studies. And we're supposedly teaching them history and philosophy, and it's a very serious context for studying philosophy, a critical context. But we do feel that studies at the university are meaningful on a personal level, and that people come here also to go through a certain process of personal development. And as part of our intellectual pursuit, meditation has a real place. Not because we want to reach enlightenment. As far as I conceive of this event, it wasn't a Buddhist workshop. It was an intellectual, academic, scientific gathering when people had an opportunity to meet and to hear Buddhist teachings from very deep Buddhist teacher, and to experience some of these insights and to look into the mind and consciousness. And looking into consciousness, we're in the 21st century. We're going to be hearing about this quite a bit. They still haven't solved the body-mind problem, if you noticed. And Buddhism has something to say about that. And actually Rinpoche said it beautifully yesterday in the meeting with the faculty. Was asking, if the humanities are in danger or not in danger, and why is funding going to brain science and that kind of thing. So he said, but then don't they realize that it's all about human beings, about the humanities, that ultimately it all comes down to that, about the way, human beings look at the world. There's nothing without that. And that's a powerful point we have in the humanities, and may take humanity another couple centuries to really let it sink in, but that's what at least we think in the humanities is going to happen and expect. And so just to say that the connection with Buddhism as part of the scientific endeavor is a very natural and serious one. And it's serious also from Buddhism's side, from Rinpoche's side, to say that critical study of Buddhism can happen at the university, and that this is a very real place where the study of Buddhism can take place. And so just to say that these kind of pursuits on a more personal or a more scientific or academic level actually meet in a very real way here at the university, and that through the kind of study that we conduct here, again, I'll mention the Indian and Indonesian studies program as an example. We can learn the languages and the cultures and the philosophy, and we can also reflect very critically about the philosophy and some of the broader context. And you're all welcome to join us in this pursuit. So, thanks again to everybody for coming, and I've taken too much time, and please, Rinpoche, it's your floor.
So, salutations to all of you first. Thank you, Professor Schumann. Yes, when I was first asked to be here in the university and asked me to talk about meditation, I was really surprised because I did go to University of London to study a little bit. Didn't finish my degree because I was distracted by making film. And then after that, I had a few encounters with the university situation. For some very, strange reasons, Buddhism gets categorized as a spiritual path, which is, I don't know whether it's right or wrong, because sometimes, I don't know whether Buddhism is a spiritual path, because Buddhists don't even believe in spirit. But this doesn't help. This kind of thing puts you into this category of missionary. And when the university's academic world is where people seriously, critically, scientifically observe the outer world, inner world, secret world, which is, I appreciate very much. That's how it should be. And it goes completely, it complements with what Buddha himself said, never take his teachings at face value, never take his teachings because he taught it. You have to analyze, you have to test it, you have to experience it, and you decide. So yes, I'm not only very surprised, but very, very honored to be in this learning center, and especially in this very, very special city. Was also very much, shocked, so to speak, because somewhere else when we watch Israel, it's always about bombs and, war and all of that. And suddenly, we are here, and it's a really, really amazing, just a so special place. It's and so powerful also, just in every level, especially on the mental level. So thank you. I have to thank the university faculties, and especially Professor Sherman for bringing me here. Now today, I think this is going to be a little bit of a challenge for me because this is a mixed group. I can see there's a very seasoned old-time Buddhist, and then there's also academic students, and then there's probably very new, completely new with Buddhism and its concept and so on and so forth. But anyway, I'll try to sort of cover a little bit, as much as possible. When I was giving the workshop, just I think yesterday or day before, someone asked me, what is the purpose of life? And this is a very interesting for me, because the question, what is purpose of life, is I think it comes from an Abrahamic mentality. It's a very interesting question. It's not an easy to answer as a Buddhist. Because for a Buddhist, if you think really deeply, purpose is a myth. And it is a really, really powerful myth. Yes, 2,000 years ago, we were been told that this is the purpose of your life, to get enlightened, to be reborn in the heaven, so on and so forth. But now we have different kind of purpose, to be rich, to be powerful, to win Nobel Peace Prize, to go to the moon, to go to the Jupiter, all kinds of purpose. Hasn't really, both, I will not, I don't know whether we have progressed, because progress is a very subjective and very relative. Many people say the world has become so, dark and so miserable. Not necessarily, world has also become good. I've just read that so many of the plagues and famine and the war has stopped. So anyway, purpose of life. If you insist in asking what's the purpose of life in Buddhism, just simply to answer, it's really, when we talk about a purpose of life, the Buddhists will always think you must be suffering. And when there is a suffering, when there is a pain, when there is an agony, then you tend to ask, what's the purpose? Because then you are seeking, you understand? And that, I think, on that context, I think we can talk about the purpose of life. The purpose of life is basically not to suffer, isn't it? Like if purpose of using a mosquito repellent is so that the mosquitoes don't bite you. The purpose of, I don't know, building a house is so that you have a shelter, so on and so forth. So basically, not suffer, not go through the agony, not go through the anxiety. Now, this is where I think Buddhism can offer something. Because Buddha, in his first ever sermon or a teaching, he said, know the suffering, know dukkha. You should know suffering. Now that is a very, very important statement. Because the suffering or the dukkha is really difficult to know. Of course, the gross level of the suffering or the pain is easy. What you want, you don't get. I don't know. Physical suffering, mental suffering. But that's only the very gross level of suffering. So just thinking that that's all there is when it comes to suffering, then I think we are not really understanding what is the suffering. Actually, the fact that you are looking for a purpose of life is already a suffering. Having a purpose, needing a purpose, is already a suffering, because you think you have a, and I think it's really a strong suffering, especially in the modern world. Suddenly, like poor people in slums of Delhi or Rio de Janeiro, they don't have time to think about the purpose of life, because they have to, they're barely managing to have a means to eat the next meal. In the modern, especially more affluent world, more modern world, the younger generation, I think they suffer a lot with, like this alienation, and then, okay, what is it? Why am I here? What is it? The German word, existentialist angst, right? Like, why am I here? You're already asking for a purpose or a definition. So this is where I think Buddhism can contribute, because I would say Buddhism has 2,500 years of tradition and experience, and not just a philosophical sort of thesis, but actual sort of experiential pith instructions, techniques, so on and so forth. Now, so I think our sort of the title this time, sort of the subject is like, what makes you not a Buddhist? Right? Something like that. So Buddhism, what is Buddhism? First of all, I have to tell you, Buddhism is a new name. It did not exist, but it's something that we have to live with now. Well, Buddhism is a path. Okay, for the sake of conversation, it's a spiritual path, I guess. Can't be a material path. So it's a spiritual path. So when we talk about a path, the ingredient of the path has to have 4 things. This is what Buddhists think anyway. This is a very Indian philosophical analysis also. in order to have a path, you need to have a 4 ingredient. Of course, when we talk about a path, obviously the path has to end somewhere. You understand? So the result or the end. So there's the result or the end. That's what you are aiming for, isn't it? So there's that result. That's 1. 2, and it's a very important one, is sort of the view. What is the view? Now, this is actually quite important, and I think we should dwell on this a little bit more. The view of the path. Because, I mean, it is of course nice to hear, oh, Buddhism is very non-violent, it's peaceful, many of them eat vegan food, like they're vegetarian, they smile, This is all very nice to hear. Of course, I will be, of course, the first person to say, yes, as a Buddhist. But if you just think that that's Buddhism, you are depriving Buddhism a lot. Buddhism is not just being vegetarian or smile or non-violent. And then, recently, Buddhism is associated with, just as Hinduism is associated with yoga, Buddhism is also very much associated with meditation. Mindfulness stuff. This also is very dangerous. Meditation alone is not going to be the fundamental character of Buddhism. So what makes Buddhism is the view, the result that I was talking about, the end, and because of the view and the aim, the result, the practice, what practice you do, and then behavior. The behavior part is probably the least thing that we can talk. There's nothing much to talk. I mean, we can, obviously, but I think we should be really looking at what is the Buddhist view in connection with the Buddhist aim. When we talk about a Buddhist view, actually it's painfully, ridiculously simple. It's so painfully, ridiculously simple. It's too simple, that's why it's so difficult. And that's why also a genuine Buddhist path never really flourishes. It doesn't, because it's kind of useless on the sort of worldly level. You understand? For instance, like one of the Buddhist view is that all compounded things are impermanent. That's one of the view. That's one of the most relative view. So, for instance, I was saying useless. Why? Because in Buddhism, we can't even have a marriage ceremony, wedding ceremony. There is no Buddhist wedding ceremony. Not in the sutras, not in the shastras, none. I mean, of course, nowadays, when people come to people like me, okay, please, I'm getting married with this person, can you do something? We throw flowers and we recite verses, auspicious verses and so on and so forth. But there is no, how to get married and what to do. There is none. And do you know why? Because, how do you do it? Based on the view. Okay, you have the boy and the girl. And sort of, okay, now you have your husband, your wife, but you know what? All compounded things are impermanent. By tonight you may get divorced. Be prepared for that. That kind of wedding ceremony is not going to draw so much attention. This is why in Korea, Christianity is really, really, because the gown, the music, and all of that. And what I'm saying is actually quite an important remark. There are a lot of scholars, and I agree with them. Buddhism declined in places like the traditional places like India. One of the main reasons why Buddhism declined is because Buddhism really can't be used for the social stuff. No wedding ceremony, no. So this is another reason why I'm a little bit cautious about this mindfulness stuff, because I feel this mindfulness is beginning to become a tool to make people free, people free themselves from stress. I mean, depending on the definition of stress, if you really follow the Buddhist path, you are not supposed to care about whether you are stressed or not. This is the least thing you care about. So what do you care about? To be awakened or not? If you are totally stressed but you are awakened, you are much better than this very relaxed but ignorant person. I would prefer this fidgety, stressed person but who knows the truth. You understand? So this is one thing to be, and then Buddhists are associated with a happy. Buddhists, ultimately Buddhists don't really care about it to be happy. There's so many misunderstandings like that. Many people always say, "Oh, you are a Buddhist, so you must do a lot of good karma." Good karma. Oh, you must believe in karma and you must do good karma. Oh, not true. According to one of the great Madhyamika commentator, Chandrakirti, he said, those who are idiots, they will do bad things and they will go to hell. Those who are idiots, underline that one, they will do good things and go to heaven. Only those who are wise will transcend the good and the bad karma and can get awakened. You see? So, to be a good boy and a good girl and to be a good karma collector doesn't make you a good Buddhist. So, okay, just to continue with the view a little bit more. So, all compounded things are impermanent. This is one of the Buddhist view. And by the way, even though this is the view that was taught by the Shakyamuni Buddha in Varanasi, it's not that suddenly after Buddha said this, everything became impermanent. Buddha is not an almighty creator. Even way before Shakyamuni Buddha, all compounded things are impermanent. And all compounded things are going to be impermanent, I think, for a long time. And all compounded things are impermanent in New Delhi, all compounded things are impermanent in Jerusalem, all compounded things are impermanent in, Times Square in New York. It's the truth. It's a simple truth. This is one of the views. The next, little bit more complicated, all emotion, anything to do with a dualistic, subjective, objective, all emotions are pain. This is one of the view. I know there'll be a lot of, sort of very touchy-feely, sort of new age, how about love? Isn't that, how can you say it's pain? How about devotion? Is it a, yes, according to Buddhism, as long as you have a subject and object, it is a pain. Because as long as you have a subject and object, you have a reference. If you have a reference, it always is a pain. Like Tom Cruise. I want to look like Tom Cruise. Maybe there's some new guy. You know, my generation is old. I don't know who is the best looking man or woman these days. But you know what I mean? So reference is a problem. Good, bad, all this is a problem. So as long as you have that kind of dualistic mind, basically, which is emotion, it is a pain. So that's the second one, the view. Now the third, even more difficult. Everything has no inherently existing nature. We are talking about the shunyata, we are talking about emptiness. So now this is a little difficult to explain, but it's actually even more simple than the other two, actually. But as I said, it's too simple, difficult. So I will try to explain this a little bit. When Buddhists say everything is non-existent, everything is shunyata, it doesn't mean that everything actually does not exist, like a negation. Not at all. I heard that Osho Rajneesh is very popular in Israel. Yeah? Osho? I don't know. Little bit? Okay. Okay, anyway, you know, he's a controversial person, but you know, he has always been a little bit, he gets a lot of Buddhist teachings also, which he said, Buddhist no is a very special no. He said, in the Buddhist no, there is a 1 million yes. I thought it is kind of a very interesting description. Basically, shunyata, emptiness, is never to be understood as a negation. So it's like this. For instance, okay, we are looking at a man, Tom Cruise. Okay, sorry, I only know Tom Cruise. Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt, is it? Okay, do you know Brad Pitt? Okay, so we are looking at Brad Pitt. And some of you think he's so handsome. And other things, no. This is what the Buddhists think. The handsome does not exist on the Brad Pitt's molecule and DNA. It's, you know, what beauty is in the eyes of the beholder is basically that, actually. But, you know, the Buddhist idea of beauty and the ugly and the tall, you know, we only talk about the beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. The Buddhists say everything is in the eyes and the ears and the nose and the tongues of the beholder. Everything. So I was talking during the workshop, I was saying like this mug, this cup of water, for us it's a water, you and I, because we have a similar kind of a constituency and a similar kind of a setup. But if there's a fish inside, if there's a small fish inside, what is that? What is it? So, something else. You understand? So, I don't know whether I'm managing to explain this properly, but basically, how it appears is not how it is. I think there are a lot of, idioms like that. Appearance is deceiving. Bit like that. We just need to extend this a little bit, the understanding of that a little bit. But shunyata, I don't want to again, there's, it's a very important and a very difficult sometimes to study also. But basically, nothing. Okay, another way to explain the third view. Subject and object are simultaneous. Remember, we were talking like, I'm in the academic, institute here. And I always tease my academic university friends saying that, well, you guys believe in objective, it has to be objective. They don't like anything subjective. But you see, the thing is, Buddhists don't believe in anything that is objective independently. Subject and the object is always together. That's why Buddhists also don't really understand the existence of a creator God, independent from you. The moment they think that the knower of the God exists simultaneously, if not before, with the God. It is the knower. And so on and so forth. And this is a really, really important. I mean, let's see if we have time later. If some people have questions, you can also ask. Okay, so that's the third. Now, these three are fairly found. I mean, these three is you can get these three. I mean, you will hear these three from Thailand, Sri Lanka, Burma, Tibet, Japan, China. Basically, if they are well informed, they would agree with these three. Now the fourth one is more Mahayana style. Okay, so the fourth view is, well, anyway, the phrase is this: Nirvana is beyond the extreme. Okay, so Nirvana, the enlightenment. What is that? Kind of, difficult to explain, but we have been talking this in the workshop quite a lot. Let's say you are sleeping in a small room, and then you have a nightmare of 500 elephants coming towards you, and you are panicked. You are so panicked, and you are like going mad, going crazy. And then, I don't know, somebody next door realizes something is wrong and comes into your room and they find that you are not in a good shape, and pinch you and wake you up with a cold water or something, and then, no more elephants. Okay? I hope this example works. Now, you were sleeping in a small room, so not even one elephant will fit, let alone 500. And before you sleep, during this nightmare, after you wake up, elephant doesn't exist. It was all. So, I think the most important point is this one. The relief that, there's no elephant, is real fake. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, you have a nightmare of elephant, you're suffering, cold water, no more elephant. But that's wrong. There was no elephant right from the beginning. It's not like the cold water did the job. So, nirvana, enlightenment, is as fake as this. So important, this one. Okay, so you will ask, so what are you doing, you Buddhists? Why are you practicing Buddhism then? If there is no enlightenment, what are you doing there? And this is what Shantideva beautifully said. Well, in order to, remember I said, get rid of the suffering, our practitioners are allowed to have one ignorance. And what is that ignorance? to think that there is an enlightenment. Why? Because we want to not suffer. So this relief, this is a kind of a complicated subject, but it's a very big study. If you want to, anyway, that's the third one. If you want to study more, you should refer to books like Madhyamika, Vajrajatika Sutra, Vimarakirti Sutra, so on and so forth. And if you want to study the fourth one, you should study like a Uttara Tantra or a Tathagata Garbha Sutra. There are many. And this, yeah. So, okay. So this four is what we call the view. View is important. The view, if you have the right view, then you have the right attitude, right practice, and then you will end up. View is so important. Like, view really determines your life. View, to be slim is good. This is what's going on right now. Places like China, everybody's crazy trying to be slim because that's the view. During the Tang Dynasty, I think especially women, they're busy trying to become fat. Because during the Tang Dynasty, the view, that time, especially women, to be fat is beautiful. You understand? So then, during the Tang Dynasty, the view to be fat is beautiful, that's the view. So their meditation is eat a lot. You understand? that's their practice. And then their, attitude, I don't know, to compare with who's fatter than who, I don't know, like that. And then the result is really becoming like a sumo wrestler. And then you have achieved that. Now is the opposite. So view is so important. I cannot emphasize this enough. Because people forget this bit. People always think Buddhism is something to do with a good karma collector, bad karma, like remover, and peaceful, non-violent, vegetarian, sitting straight, I don't know, stuff like this, mindfulness. They are accepted, but fundamental is the view. Okay, so that's, you can ask me questions later, but now let me talk a little bit about the result. Remember, the path always have to have a result. Otherwise, what's the use of the path? So what is the result? How do you define the result or the aim of Buddhism? And this is interesting, especially for those who are Buddhists or those who want to study Buddhism. You should really make a note of this. And I have not really seen people really thinking this way. And actually, this is important. Result in Buddhism is defined. In Tibetan, we call it Tralde. Tralde. Tral means remove, eliminate. De means result. So actually in Buddhism, result, there's nothing you can get. Something to get is not the Buddhist aim. So what's the Buddhist aim? To remove. Remove. But of course, it sounds very negative, right? So there are, if I have some Californian student, I say, there's something called Buddhahood you can get. He has a beautiful head and a golden color. And for encouragement, we use also the words like get, achieve. may all sentient beings achieve enlightenment. You understand? So we do use that kind of word. But fundamentally, Buddhist result is defined by what we call result of elimination. It's simply as washing the cup. When your cup is dirty, what is your aim? To make it clean. Elimination of dirt. Because the Buddhist view of ourselves is you are perfect as it is. There's nothing to change. This is good. You are perfect. Not a, in fact, Tantric Buddhism says that the real you, even years and years and years of so-called Dhamma practice is not going to make it better. That you are true nature. And lifetime after lifetime of roaming in the samsaric world is not going to make your nature worse. It stays. Like the cup, you can put all kinds of dirt, this, soya sauce, tomato sauce, mud, whatever, but the cup stays as it is because all the other dirt is temporary, removable, and is not its nature. And you can keep the cup dirty thousands of years. But the true nature of the cup is not at all, what do you call it, changed. So, result in Buddhism is elimination of the defilement. Okay? Next, we talk about Buddhist practice. Now, here I'm going to be a little bit, critical towards a lot of present day sort of mindfulness, whatever, so beware. A Buddhist, how do you define Buddhist practice? What makes a Buddhist practice an authentic practice? Whatever you do, be it something so religious like offering a flower, incense, chanting mantra, shaving hair, sitting straight, sitting, in the hammock, whatever. No matter what you do, your action has to go against duality. If this action is not going against the duality, it's not a Buddhist practice. This is why I question many of the so-called mindfulness methods these days. Are they really aiming for duality? I don't think so. Because they're aiming to be stress-free. They're aiming to be calm. So then there is that problem. A Buddhist practice has to become an antidote towards anything that is a duality. If it does, then it's a Buddhist practice. Now the fourth one. So, very simple. What is the Buddhist behavior? It has to be non-extreme. So to give you an example, if you go to let's say Buddhist temple, you will notice this. Okay, so you walk into a Buddhist temple, especially Mahayana, especially in the Vajrayana temple, you go in, and then of course we respect the Buddha and his follower, the monks, serene, begging bowl, gentle, non-violent. We respect them. Now, so to be serene, austere, kind of a very simply living kind of behavior. Is that what the Buddhist model are? No. On the other side of the painting, you will see in the follower of the Buddha, namely like Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, earrings, necklaces, very rich, very, layman. You understand? They're very rich. So there's monks like Shariputra, very, very austere, simply living. But then there's a bodhisattvas, rich. Sometimes they even have wife, girlfriend, whatever, chariots. And not only that, the follower of the Buddha had people like Delopa, Naropa. They are crazy. If they walk into any Buddhist temple today, they will be kicked out. Even though they were the forefathers of Buddhism, you understand? They are they don't bathe, they don't wash, they're so dreadlock, never washed. I don't know, they eat fish, tell lies. There are so many prostitutes. Some of the high, very, very high Buddhists, revered Buddhist masters are prostitute, hunters. You understand? So here it tells you something. It tells you that a behavior has to be non-extreme. So this is what I always say. Buddhism is never really going to become so popular because it's too complicated, you understand? Human beings don't like this kind of, anything goes. If I'm a sort of Buddhist dictator, nothing to do with the Dharma, okay? Nothing to do with the spiritual path. Just wanting to be sort of a Buddhist, jihadi, Buddhist jihadi. If I'm this materialistic Buddhist jihadi, I would make the Buddhism so simple. Oh, you are a Buddhist, you should not eat chicken. Buddhists should not eat chicken. Buddhists must go once in their life at least to Bodh Gaya. Buddhists must pray towards Bodh Gaya once a day. Something so simple. I think I will have millions of disciples like that. But as soon as I talk about the shunyata, the dependent arising, all compounded things are impermanent, then it's just not, socially it's not, attractive. But having said all of this, I also feel there's a lot of good news. Because I think, especially in the modern world, people also are very critical and analytical, and this is a good news for Buddhism. Really, really good news. I was just talking to a faculty yesterday that Buddhism had a lot of challenge. The outer challenge, disasters, conversions, war, famine, that really declined Buddhism a lot. But much worse than that is the culture. Culture is the biggest enemy of Buddhism. The Tibetans, if you go to Tibetan Buddhist teachings, 90% of them is Tibetanism. They don't really teach you Buddhism, you understand? It's all about Tibetan stuff. Tibetan culture is not Buddhism, but it's got so mixed up. And it's really one of the worst challenge, because without the culture, you also have no vessel. So we have to have a culture. So it's a really difficult. And now I feel there's another challenge of Buddhism is diluting Buddhism, like the mindfulness thing that I was talking about. Mindfulness without the shunyata, mindfulness without the relative truth, mindfulness without the, all the views and the behavior and all of that I was talking earlier. Oh, that's going to destroy Buddhism. because much worse in a way. Because you can tell a difference between a shit and a gold. You know, even though they are both yellow. Yellowish. But between a brass and a gold, much more difficult to differentiate. And I feel that mindfulness and all of this, without the proper view, foundation, it can dilute Buddhism. And so this is where I feel that places like university, where you have the critical thinking, analytical thinking, is really, really important. Of course, at the end, analysis and the study and the hearing and the contemplation is not going to do the job. You have to practice, you have to meditate. That is, of course, the utmost important. But I think, it's a bit like this, head and the heart. Your heart, the feeling, you have this feeling, but I think it's really good to have the head bugging you all the time. Hey, are you really sure? Are you doing the right thing? This sort of seesaw between head and the heart when you approach to Buddhism, I think is a way to it will actually protect Buddha Dharma. How's the time now? We are okay?
Maybe 10 minutes and then it's time for questions, if you want questions.
Maybe we can ask questions now. I don't know whether I'm making. Yeah, maybe I don't know whether I'm making any sense. So I'd like to hear from you. Yes, please.
You talked about the view and the four views. So if one is all compounded things are impermanent and they don't have intrinsic nature, then you talked about the nature that needs to be removed, like the cup. So can you talk more about what is it that endures even though it doesn't have nature and it's impermanent, but it endures, goes on? Endures. I mean, you said, you wandered through samsara, we wandered through samsara, and this thing always stayed the same.
Right. Oh, okay. I think you are okay. Got it. No. You are talking about. You are talking about. Yeah. Okay.
And if it's confounded, and if it's impermanent, and
yes,
nature.
Very good that you caught that one, because it's like this. I think the gentleman is asking something like this. I will rephrase this. Can you correct me? That I was talking about how the true nature of ourself, like the true cup, never changes, no matter how long it has been roaming and rolling around in the dirt. So it somehow seemed to indicate that there is a something. Yeah, something. Very good. This discussion is a big study in the Buddhist philosophy school. There's actually two schools. There's actually two thoughts. Okay? And we need to talk about the Trinde, which is the result of elimination. Okay. It's a bit like this. Like the sky is filled with cloud, let's say. See, it's already an oxymoron. You understand? But as someone who wants to, let's say, even especially if you are in something like, Vancouver, there's not blue sky for a long time. You can really get depressed. You really long for a blue sky. But the blue sky is imputed. It's an idea. But when you don't have that blue sky, you still suffer. Because you have this habit of wanting some sunshine, you understand? Once in a while, if not for every day, like you do here. But you know, it's a really depressing gray sky. And then you sort of blame it to these clouds. Oh, the clouds. But actually the clouds have never really bothered the sky at all. You understand? So this true nature, basically what I'm saying is this true nature during the path is imagined one also. So this is why I was saying earlier, you can have one ignorance as a path dweller, thinking that there is something called imaginment. And then you will ask me, why? Because you are suffering. If you are not suffering, fine. But you have to be suffering. Okay?
In the beginning, you mentioned the Abrahamic mentality, and I want to ask you how to find this mentality connected to the Dharma or the Buddhist teaching, if you find a connection.
Oh, I think I have got myself into a trouble here. I'm not so sure actually. I've read Quran really, quite diligently, and I've read a little bit of Bible, but never really managed to read Old Testament so far. But I have, and then here and there, as I talk, I feel that the Abrahamic religion is very dualistic. If it is dualistic, then the base is very dualistic. Then the Buddhist, it's a really stark difference from Buddhism, because Buddhism is very much on with a non-duality. If you lose non-duality, you lose Buddhism. Yeah. But you understand, but having said this, I know, maybe if you go to a Buddhist temple, there's a statues. I mean, Abrahamic people even scold the Buddhists, you guys are idol worshipper and blah, 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 isn't it? But, for that's easy, because the idol, the whatever, the statues, the paintings, and all this is actually mindfulness practice, so-called mindfulness. So this is what I was talking actually with the university students yesterday. We sat a few minutes here and there yesterday, and I said, I think sitting straight, breathing in and out, concentration, mindfulness, I think people sort of buy that. People kind of, okay, this sounds good, this sounds not too strange, this sounds scientific, this, it's kind of calming and all of that. But if I do something like this and say, this is actually a mindfulness. It's, no, that's an Asian sort of, movement. Or if I say, Om Mahum Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Hum, that's a mantra. But it's all a mindfulness practice. But I can see why these things gets interpreted as religious, like incense, flowers, and all of that. Anyway, you wanted to continue?
I thought about the Akedah, the story of the Akedah, when Abraham died, he waited for the son 120 years, and then he came and wanted to, in 1 minute, to finish it all.
Okay.
And so I thought about maybe you can call him fundamentalist. Maybe on the other hand, you can call him maybe a Buddhist, Maybe he
Right.
try to release himself from
Okay.
attachment.
Well, as I said, I'm not so well informed, so I can't really make much comment on this one. But basically, I feel that there's a lot of duality. I would say Jainism is really, really close to Buddhism. Jain. I don't know whether there's a Jain study in. It's a very sophisticated, really, really.
You mentioned before that it's a good combination of the academic world and Buddhist thought and philosophy. And I was wondering, because Buddhism, and especially Tibetan Buddhism, has a lot to say about the world of appearances. The world of appearances, the relative truth.
Right.
Many things that for modern scientific people are difficult to accept.
Yes.
For example, one example would be reincarnation, in the Tibetan tradition, many others. Would you like to see those things examined with scientific tools?
Yes. Actually, that one I'm never worried. That part. Worried. Like a reincarnation, so on and so forth. I know it has made a big deal about this, like, I don't know, many people like Stephen Batchelor, a lot of, scholars have made comments about this. This doesn't worry me at all. Do you know why? Because in Buddhism, nowhere there is a mentioning that Buddhists believe in reincarnation ultimately. Buddhists don't even believe in nirvana ultimately. How can we believe in a reincarnation? Now, on a relative level, relative means a perception that is found by deceptive mind. That's what the relative is. Conditioned mind. I am conditioned to think that this is not fire or a jewel. I'm conditioned to think that this is a water. And my perception is solidified by you guys. Consensus. This is water, isn't it? You will all say yes. And this will confirm my relative truth more. So on and so forth. So on the relative level, relative perception is totally a projection of a deceptive mind. That one, this is so beautiful. There's a sutra called Yapsen Jabuddo, which is a really important sutra. The title of the sutra is Meeting the Father and the Son. That's the title. And there Buddha said, I have no quarrel with ordinary people. Ordinary people have quarrel with me. This is an important statement, because what he is talking about is relative truth. Because we are really talking about academic, theory now. It's like this. So on the relative level, you have a head on your neck. Just as you have a head on your neck, I believe that you have a head on your neck, and I believe in reincarnation. It is equally absurd. But I know that a different cultural setting, reincarnation, what do you mean? That's a story. But head is there, I can touch, I can feel. But that's all perception level. Only on the perception level you can see this. So I think reincarnations and then the rituals, I think this is rituals.
Like therma, CD,
Oh yeah, blessing also. You are talking about the blessing? Siddhi? Is that what you were saying? Siddhi, blessing? Okay. Yeah, prayers. All of this exists on the relative level. And relative, when I say relative, one should never downgrade or dismiss relative truth. Relative truth is so important. And okay, just on this level, I think this is kind of important, especially if you are studying Buddhism. There's two things that you need to know, okay? When you are studying Buddhism, there's two things you need to know. Buddhists always makes distinctions between relative truth and ultimate truth. Okay? This is very important. But what you need to know is that relative truth and the ultimate truth also are both relative truth. Okay? Another thing, and this is what the philosophy students always make the mistake. An analytical system that is meant to find what is ultimate truth should never be used to find the relative truth. This is a philosopher's flaw, a philosopher's rule number 1. I will tell you why. Do you want to enjoy a rainbow? Well, better don't go close. You stay away and there's a rainbow. But it doesn't exist. It's a rainbow. It's an illusion. As you go, oh, what kind of rainbow? What is made out of this? You go closer and closer, rainbow disappears. So rule number 1, you never use analytical system to find the ultimate truth. You never apply on the relative level. So questions like, how about this reincarnation? Does it really exist? That is an analysis of ultimate truth. Who is born? Then Buddhists will say there is no reincarnation. But on the relative level, yes. I saw you yesterday. See? I believe that you are the same person as you came yesterday. But in reality, you are not. You have become older, 24 hours. So on and so forth. You understand? So I think I always enjoy talking with academics, scientists, the relative truth and ultimate truth. So that's one, okay? The second thing that you need to know, and I've shared this with the students, you need to know something called Tangden and Ngeden, which is really important. Whenever Buddha taught, whatever Buddha taught, there's two things. Some teachings, he never meant it. He did not mean it. Other things, he really meant it. You will ask, why was he teaching things that he did not mean? Oh, out of compassion. Just like the mother telling a Cinderella stories to a kid, trying to put him to sleep. Why? Because, you don't want to tell a kid of, 2 years old, if you don't sleep, you are, the energy exhaustion. No, they won't understand. Instead, you tell a beautiful story of Cinderella, then the kid will sleep. And what you want? Kid needs rest. There's a lot of teachings like that in Buddhism, such as Jatakamala Sutra, such as there is samsara, there is a nirvana, such as good karma, bad karma. This is all Cinderella teachings. And please, by me saying this, I'm not looking down at Cinderella. Oh, I love Cinderella teachings. In fact, that's all I can grab and I can use. You try to order a glass of H2O in a restaurant. You will have a hard time. What are you talking about? You should say, give me a glass of water, then you are fine. That's how the relative world works.
Why is there the distinction between ultimate and relative? If they're both relative. Why? How does this come to be for what purpose?
Because, as I said, that's a very good question actually. Because there is a path dweller. Basically, because of that. Path dweller meaning somebody suffering. They are made up for the sake of communication. I'm not making these things up, by the way. This is only in the Buddhist study. It's a tool, we make it up.
Doesn't it just complicate things for the suffering path dweller? This ultimate relative.
Are you now talking about the actual practice?
The actual view and practice.
The view, in order to hear and contemplate, yes, it complicates things, but if you are not, it's a bit like this. This is what Longchenpa, one great master, he said, the best student of Buddha Dharma is someone who is an absolutely 100% idiot. If this 100% idiot meets a compassionate and a very, very accomplished master, very good. Not much work. Awaken right away. But the problem is all these half-smart, half-witted people, which we are. Understand? Then we have a problem. Yeah, this is yes, please.
In a way,
Speak up.
in a way, non-dualism doesn't allow pluralism.
Pluralism? Oh no, actually it does, on the relative level.
Yeah. So, I mean, what does the Buddhist teaching say about the experience of different subjects? If the ultimate level says that there is no pluralism.
I would, okay, if you want to be serious with this, I would really want you to read a book written by Tsongkhapa, Lama Tsongkhapa, such a great scholar. There's a very small book called Praise to the Dependent Arising. It's really good. Okay, it's a very important question. It's like this. Usually, when something appears, we get attracted by appearance and we don't really think about its reality. You understand? And that's when all the downfall comes. All the downfall comes. Okay, I want to really. Can you repeat that question again?
There is some kind of doesn't fit. Also logically, but I'm trying to point about not fitness in some more ultimate, like ultimate reality level. Which, when you say, when you point about a non-dualistic view about
Everything.
so it doesn't allow any kind of plurality.
No, actually, it's the opposite. This is what Nagarjuna's famous quotation. If you can accept shunyata, non-duality, then you can accept everything. If you are dualistic, then you are stuck with that. So this is why I can think this is a water. Fish can think what he wants to think. And when this water is in the cup, it's drinkable. If this is in the toilet, it's dirty. You understand? That relative world fits in so well, and this reflects in the Buddhist practice also.
In the material world, it's not easy to understand. But when we talk about the subjective experience of life and the consciousness, so you see that there is different subjects which you can't point on a material, you can't say about subject that you say about the cup of water. When you point about a person,
Right.
about his own consciousness in the world. So it's a different kind of talk when you speak about the cup of water or the level of subject. So it's
Can you explain a little bit more about level of subject?
and yeah, like I say, there is the subject and the object. So
Mhm.
in the object level of the understand
The relative,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
But on the subject level,
On the subject level, it's hard to see that the experience, in the experience, you see that there is different subjects which are divided.
right.
So it points in a kind of pluralism which the non-duality doesn't allow.
Okay, good. I think I understood. First of all, subject and object definition is where I think we maybe need to discuss some more. Because as I said earlier, remember, the Buddhists, especially, like a Chittamata school of Buddhism, Madhyamika, Yogacharya school, they never really accept an independent object or an independent subject. You understand? And but on the relative level, what you are saying is, okay, your subject sees something, and my subject sees another thing. Pluralism, that we accept. And this is why, actually, in Buddhism, there's something called 84,000 teachings. This is why one teaching never works. You need a different teaching. I need a different teaching, and this is true. This is, this is a very, But, interestingly again, your subject or your mind's shunyata, the nature, is exactly same as my subject's nature. Shunyata, emptiness. I think the study of a Madhyamika, if you want, and the dependent arising will maybe answer some of these questions. I think when you are talking about pluralism, right? Pluralism, you are asserting that there is an independent subject. Yes, that's a little difficult for a Buddhist to accept. Independent subject. Okay. Yes.
I wanted to ask about
Go ahead.
Okay. I wanted to ask about the Buddhist prayers, because I understand you in your tradition you pray for
Yes.
yourself as the Buddhist nature or the Buddha nature and.
Not just that, a lot of other prayers also may have, people have, like become beautiful, may people become rich, or also.
So, yes, I'm thinking about what do you do, like what your intention, like, and how theoretically it works.
Okay, very good. Okay, so how does the prayer fit in with the Buddhist understanding of view? Right? The view that I was talking. We talked about the four view. So we are talking about how does the prayer work. Okay. Remember, all compounded things are impermanent. This is a very, very important fundamental confidence booster for the prayer. Because everything is everything is compounded and therefore impermanent. Things can change. Prayer is something to do with the changing. Oh, please. I'm now like this, but I want to become like this. So this is why, relatively, Buddhists also believe in prayer. Okay? Believe is not the right word. They do prayer. Now, if you are going higher, a little bit more higher understanding, there's so many prayers. Okay, there's one prayer by Thangtong Gyalpo. It just popped up in my head. Thangtong Gyalpo is one great Buddhist master who was building bridge all the time, and he was also a man responsible for composing Tibetan opera. Anyway, what he did, what he said, Jumadavi. So 사람 주마대로 상징이 두죠. So this is what he said. Okay, so you do something good, let's say charity. He said, with this illusion like merit, good karma, may all illusory sentient beings go through the illusory path and then reach the illusory enlightenment. So it's like this. Another level is this. You know, if you wish, and let's say this cup is dirty, and you wish the cup is clean, right? You wish that it is clean. Your wish is, what do you call it? Your wish can be achieved. Your wish can be achieved. Do you know why? Because fundamentally it's not dirty. This is why the Buddhists always say, may all sentient beings be enlightened. That prayer is much more easy to achieve than may I live long. Ooh, that one is not so. What do you mean long? I mean 1 minute more? Or like 10 years more? You understand? But may all sentient beings be enlightened. That's achievable. Why? Because all sentient beings, their defilements is removable. It's not their nature. So your effort is worthwhile. If you put effort in making yourself live long time, like 100 years, 200 years, I guess it's going to be a kind of achievable soon, isn't it? But do you even want that? You know, that's another thing. Okay?
How do you practice non-duality when you drink water or watch TV or read a book?
Oh yes. Oh, there's so many. Is there a way to do the non-duality practice while you are, drinking a cup of tea, water, or watching TV, football, whatever? Oh yeah, and actually that's important question because there's something called post-meditation. Yes. Your practice becomes much better. Sitting on a meditation cushion in a very beautiful meditation hall, sit there, watch breathing 1 hour, and then let's say you have a terrible fight with your husband or a wife or a friend. During that fight, argument, 1 moment of mindfulness, I will choose this 1 moment. Much more preferred, because it will penetrate you more. Yeah, of course, that's given. Meditation on the cushion is a bit like trying to ride bicycle. Let's say like me, I don't know how to ride bicycle. So to learn how to ride bicycle, you need to sort of practice. Let's say somewhere here. But I can't be riding bicycle every day on this. What's the point? I have to upgrade myself, go to the rocky, sort of situations, Otherwise, I will only know how to ride bike here.
How do you do it?
Oh, how do you do it? Oh, now, really big question is that one. You're talking about methods. Well,
Can you define the non-duality?
well, can I
Define what you mean by non-duality?
non-duality? Yeah, this is a very big non-duality. I've been using this. It's there, but it's not there. That's one way. It's like, do you look at the mirror? Your face is there, but it's not really there. But it's there. You use it to comb your hair. But it's also not there, right? Appearance and existence is not there, but it's there. Buddhists think just like the reflection of your face in the mirror, you and I, everything is like this. It's there, but it's not there. But this is difficult to get it. I mean, easier to understand intellectually, but emotionally difficult. Do you know why? Because usually we have a habit of falling into one extreme. When sometimes we get attracted by it's there, oh, it's there, proud, cheerful, you know, what is it? Good mood, like that, excited. Then sometimes we face that it's not there, depressed, you understand, angry. So this is difficult. That's why you need a gradual, path to get used to it. So there's a shamatha, vipassana, meditation, and but as I think we have talked enough about how meditation is really meant to actualize that non-duality. Well, you were asking how to do it when you must have done some meditation, no? Well, then just continue with that. The subject and object? Okay. One of the best methods is whatever comes in your mind, just be aware of it and no judgment. You know why? Because what it does is it actually does what we call, why? Do you know why you have a duality? Because there's a lot of food for duality, feeding. So now you need to do economy embargo. You need to, what do you call it, control the ration that feeds this duality. And how do you do that? Just notice this moment thought without judgment. That's really, it's a bad news for the duality. It's the worst news. Duality loves not to notice this thought. Duality wants you to be engaged, occupied, get busy. Duality wants to, okay, I want to have a water. Is this water? Where is this water from? Oh, this is, thought. Duality loves this. Story. Then, stories, music, drama. Then you get entangled. But when the thought comes, if you just be aware, even for a moment, that train of thought suddenly gets confused. What to do now? But of course, young beginner meditator gets distracted. But if you keep on doing, then it really disrupts the usual strategy of thoughts.
Are you okay to go on?
Yeah, when is the time?
15 minutes.
Okay, yes, please.
You said before about the connection between the actual view and the vehicle, the tradition that carries that view. Because
Okay.
how we are to different between them.
You should, okay. First, I will tell you something very classic way of answering this, okay? Which is karma. Your karma is going to really play a major role in this. How? Okay, let's say let's say you are, I don't know so much, so I'm laughing this a little bit. Let's say you are a student of Nietzsche, right? Nietzsche?
Yes.
Sort of. And you are reading his book, and you are so tired of its negation, right? Sort of, not this, not that. You are so tired of this. And you want to have some positive thinking, I don't know. Right? See, that's already a karma. See, you are already preferring. You are not preferring the negative negation. So you are already you are longing for some sort of a positive something. Then, okay, let's say you walk into a library. Then you pick up a book, let's say Uttaratantra by Maitreya, where he does not, his language is not negation. It's like, you are perfect. That's how he comes in. So then, and then this actually makes you feel good. This makes you feel, I can resonate with this. So then you choose. You will choose that path. So what I'm saying is, it's a lot to the karma. Your karma, basically karma is your emotion and your habit and your yes, emotion and habit, isn't it? Mainly, that's what karma is going to play a very important role. So, okay, so I don't know. Maybe you will choose something like sitting. But maybe you are someone like me, someone who hates sitting. You don't have to sit. You can do things like chant mantras, do prayers, do ceremonies. Then you will also flow from there. But all of this, as long as you are not going away from that fourth view I said, no problem. No problem at all. One is not better than the other. Okay. Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you for a beautiful, eloquent presentation of the teachings and a personal example in front of our eyes. Very nice thing. I want to ask a mundane question about the practice of Buddhism in Tibet today, and what would be your hopes for the future? First of all, what is it today, and what would be your hopes for the future?
For Buddhism, right? As I said earlier, we have to be careful always with the Tibetan Buddhism, the one thing they have to be careful with it. One thing they have to be careful is their own culture. Their culture can hijack Buddhism. This has already happened a lot and already happening. And this is a big worry. Yes, people talk about materialism and all of that. No, it does not really. Yeah, of course, to a certain extent, but the real thing is culture. Now, right now in Tibet, they have some of the biggest monastery and the learning school. Tibet and Sichuan, in Qinghai, they have some of the most accomplished Buddhist teachers, and they have amazing study going on. So from that level, it is looking good. But I'm always afraid that the culture is going to, because people are also very, very attached to culture. Anyway, there's a question.
If one of the students from Introduction to World Religions wants to ask a question,
Well, I see.
do you want to say this? So,
Just we have here the Introduction to World Religions course this morning. I don't know if they've stuck around, but if anybody wants to ask a question coming from that course, I do very much encourage it.
it's okay. It's not just
Okay.
and
Yes, please.
last time shortly, but this is questions we got from the internet.
Okay. Yes, please.
To clarify, I mean, for the purposes of the class that we're taking, what would be your view as to what extent, in what form, it is a religion? The Buddhism and the philosophy and the practice and the way of life, does it, what definition is a religion?
True. This is a very good question. I haven't really thought about it. I think, one thing I need to tell you, I've never, there are people who say that Buddhism is not a religion, it's a philosophy. I don't know. I don't also want to lose the religiosity aspect of Buddhism if you call it religion. But religion seems to also have the ingredient of culture and some sort of a belief, I guess. Is Buddhism a philosophy? Some people say Nagarjuna's philosophy is philosophy or no philosophy. And already I told you, spiritual path, those are, I think philology study is kind of important, isn't it? I think there's a lot of missing, misunderstanding and missing, between the scientists and Buddhists also, many times. They talk about mind and their conference on body and mind. And I don't know, when Buddhists say mind, and when the scientists talk about mind, whether they are talking about the same thing. And if so I think that definition has to be established first, isn't it? Because the Buddhist definition of the mind is very complicated. There's even a sutra. There's several sutras where Buddha was asked, what is mind? And he, his answer is two contradiction answer. Many of the Buddhist teachings are like that. He said, mind, there is no mind, mind is luminous. That is, to the question, what is mind? He said, mind, as if there is a mind. Okay? Second portion of the line, the same answer, there is no mind. So it's contradicted to the first one. There is no mind. Then the third one, mind is luminous. So it's contradicting to the second one. And this three statement is a very, very, this three statement actually you can say is like the source of three vehicles. So many, little hard to answer this question. Okay.
Yes, I would like to ask a very primitive question. I'm sorry.
Please.
What about faith?
Faith.
I lived for 40 years with someone, and she died, which is natural and accepted. Now, should I have cultivated detachment? Should I have said, oh, this is just part of
life, and I have to accept it. Yes, I should, but I couldn't. Because pain is part of life, and I don't quite see how the intellectual approach that you take can deal with emotional pain and energy. Is that a fair question?
Some part I missed.
Can somebody
Yes.
translate it for me? I'm too far away. That's all. I'll start again. I'll say that I lost someone that I loved, and I felt pain. Isn't that a good thing? Should I not have felt pain? Should I be detached from it?
Right. Yes, yeah. I have no problem with this.
Yes, but you lost India because people were not emotionally engaged with Buddhism. They turned to Hinduism, which was a lot easier to understand.
Oh, I see, like that. It's a very complicated, this one. Sometimes, what I call the weakness of Buddhism is the strength of Buddhism. It is actually the strength. So there's a little bit different way of looking at it. Yeah, it's a little bit complicated, this one. But I know sometimes it's also kind of sad. I was just talking the first day with a workshop that, for instance, like Japan is one of the most important Buddhist country in the past, but they have lost so much mainly to the material world. For instance, the Zen Buddhism is like one of the most profound, and they have this concept called wabi-sabi. It's like so profound. But now, wabi-sabi, most of the young Japanese, they don't even know. And those who know, they think it's something to do with the Japanese design. Which is, sort of, but wabi-sabi really is rooted to the Buddhist wisdom. It basically is talking about how imperfect is beautiful and how temporary is beautiful. Okay. So maybe shall I just choose one and then we end it here? Okay. Okay, there's a question, it's a little bit difficult, but how within this illusory world can practice-based art support the process of letting go? I think talking about art. So I'm going to try to answer this. In Tibetan, the word art is, we say, Jup Tsal. It's quite an interesting, actually. It's a bit like this. The only way to tell, not only way, one of the most powerful way to tell the truth to somebody is by lying. So art is almost like a created, fabricated. It's a lie, actually. It's almost like a lie. But your intention is to tell the truth. You understand? So I think if your intention and if your view is not lost, I think art can, everything is an art, isn't it? From the time you wake up in the morning, you are all, we are always playing with somebody or to yourself. And how you're good at it makes you feel, will determine how you live your life. Anyway, I think that's about all. Again, like to, offer my gratitude towards the university and faculties and the professor, Chairman here. I offer also my wish for this is my projection about, Israel and Jerusalem. This is really a center where a lot of thinkers and analysis, and I hope this will really continue and flourish and give reward so that it will bring peace and harmony to the country and to the world in general. Thank you.